Survivors, seekers, and thrivers, welcome to Transcending Trauma, a spiritual odyssey. I'm Shari Leigh Roberts, living proof that transformation is real. Get ready for powerful insights, inspiring stories, and a little laughter along the way.
Today, we have the incomparable Frank King in the house. Frank has made unbelievable impact in so many lives. I am thrilled to have him here today. Thank you, Frank. To set the stage, please tell us about your history and diagnosis of mental illness, and we'll take it from there.
Depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. I have a therapist friend who has a client who it goes back 5 generations. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My grandmother had taken care of pretty much everything, but my mother couldn't reach her on the phone. So she drove over. And she discovered that my grandmother had written the checks for the bills, addressed the envelope, stamped them, put them on the kitchen counter. And she had pinned her will to her house coat so my mother could find it easily. And she closed all the windows and doors, turned on the old gas stove, blew out the pilot light, and sat down at the dining room table and wrote a suicide note. My mother found her. 9 years later, my mother could not reach my grandmother's sister, my great aunt. And given the family history, and my great aunt was about the age where people in my family tend to wind down. She had, I believe, I think glaucoma. She was losing her sight. And we speculate that she was of a generation where she didn't want to be a burden. And in suicidality, burdensomeness is one of the 3 legs of the stool. You feel like the world would be better off without you. So my mother could not reach her on the phone. So she bundled me into the car at 4 years old. We drove over to her apartment, let ourselves in, and nothing was out of place until we got to the kitchen, where everything that should have been in the old refrigerator, an old lock type, if you're young, you've probably seen them on television. Not a magnetic strip that holds the door closed, but a latch. And everything that should have been in there was on the counter: the butter, the milk, eggs, cheese. And what had happened was my great aunt had decided to end her life by crawling into the lock type refrigerator and pulling the door to behind her. Because once you're in, there's no way to get out.
Yeah.
She had apparently changed her mind at some point and tried to claw her way out. So you can imagine what the scene would look like. So my mother, not realizing all this has happened, me holding onto her skirt tail, walks over, swings the refrigerator door open, and my great aunt falls out and pins me to the floor. We're face to face with her face frozen, that final moment of horror. And I'm told I screamed for days. I had no conscious memory of it for a long time. However, if you're already hardwired for depression and suicide, as I am, and you're that close to an actual suicide, I don't think anybody could have gotten any closer, then the chances of you seriously considering taking your life later in life go up. And that's what happened.
At what point in your life did you realize that things were not quite right?
Well, I did not remember the incident for a long time. My mother created a myth that anyone in the family, if I brought it up, was to tell me that when she swung the door open, my great aunt was sitting in the refrigerator, serene, with her hands folded in prayer.
Wow.
Well, that was her generation. So
Yeah.
I didn't have a conscious memory of it until I was probably 2012. When I told the myth, when I repeated the myth to my cousin, who's 10 years older. So he had vivid memories of this, he wasn't there, but he was, in the area at the time.
Yeah.
And and he said, "What? Serene my ass. The old bat fell out on you and pinned you to the floor, and it all came rushing back." Now, in the interim, starting in my mid-20s, married and miserable, a wonderful woman, but I was miserable. We shouldn't have gotten married. The joke I tell is we had nothing in common, opposites attract. She was pregnant, I wasn't. So actually, we had no children, but I love the joke. And I was selling insurance, great business, but miserable, and not doing what I believed I was born to do, which was stand-up comedy, and miserable. And then in January of 1984, driving down Highway 163 in San Diego about 5 in the evening, I had a thought. Why don't you just kill yourself? Well, that was the first time that had happened. So my second thought was, wait a minute. I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I can always kill myself. So that was the first time I actually had that thought cross my mind.
Tell me what your thought was. I mean, how did you view your mom? And that generally changes your life's
Mhm.
view on things. So,
Well, she was just trying to protect me, I suppose. Um,
yeah, yeah.
then she had prayed shortly after it happened, after I screamed for days, that she wanted to make a deal with God. She said that if God could make me forget it, she'd give up 10 years of her life. And she died at 62, which for people of her age, that's about 10 years before the life expectancy. So
Yeah, but when your cousin
hmm,
told you your memory and what you were told is wrong,
hmm.
what did you do? How did that change you?
Well, it had been so long ago, almost 50 years. So I wasn't traumatized. I did have all of a sudden a vivid memory. It all came rushing. It was obviously walled off somewhere in my brain,
Yeah,
filed.
yeah,
Came back. It made a number of things all of a sudden made sense. My depression, my thoughts of suicide. I didn't know what illnesses I had until several years later. I've never been to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a
okay,
therapist. However, there are two women, and I wrote 4 books on men's mental health. And one of the women is a psychologist, the other is a therapist. And I was telling them my symptoms, and they diagnosed me. They said, "Well, you have major depressive disorder and you have chronic suicidal ideation," which depression is relatively common. Chronic suicidal ideation is relatively rare.
yeah,
It's not even in the big book of psychological disorders. The what is it? Those 3 initials. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Yeah, it's not in DSM-5. Hopefully it'll be in DSM-6, but I mean I've told psychologists and therapists about my condition, chronic suicidal ideation, and some of them have stared at me like a pig staring at a wristwatch. They have no idea what I'm talking about. Although they've told me afterwards they all of a sudden remembered patients with similar symptoms as they go back through that mental Rolodex of their patients, realizing, oh my gosh, that's probably what was going on, but they were not
yes.
aware. Yeah. So
Yes. At what point did you understand your great aunt had died and have your intuitive abilities played a part in your journey?
I think when I mentioned in January of 84 that I had those thoughts of suicide,
Yeah.
and I had known I wanted to be a comedian since I was 9 years old in the fourth grade and told my first joke. And so I knew A, I shouldn't be married. B, I shouldn't be working in the insurance business. Intuitively knew that it just wasn't for me. And that
Yeah.
I should be spending evenings at the comedy club doing open mic night. And in fact, when I did my first open mic night on April 1st, 84, halfway through my set, I heard a voice inside my head that said simply, "You're home." So I, knew.
Do you know who that voice was?
Was mine as far as I could tell. I've had it happen 2 or 3 times in my life, but only 2 or 3 times where I got that feeling like right place, right time, right thing.
Yeah.
I have had one where I was wrong place, wrong time, wrong thing. I should never have married my first wife. I knew intuitively going down the aisle that I was making a mistake.
Me too.
Really?
I so hope that my dad would say, Bug, don't do it. Tell me about that. This is your first wife.
Mhm.
Is the gal that gave up everything and went on tour?
No, that's my second wife, who was very supportive of my comedy career. She's believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself.
Okay.
My first wife was a wonderful woman, just very, I'd, what would the word be? Beg pardon?
She didn't get you.
No, no, I know, but she was from a family of insurance agents. I mean, they were very, you know, that's you sell insurance, you get a paycheck, you work 40 years for a company, you retire, yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. You get married, she stops working the first child, you have a second child. When they get to school age, she goes back to work part-time. I mean, it was very much very, very young and upwardly mobile. That's the way her folks had been and their folks had been. And so she just she never quite got the whole, she couldn't wrap her mind around how someone can make a living and well doing stand-up comedy, which I understand. I mean, it was so far outside of her comfort zone that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
she wasn't a bad person. We were high school sweethearts, college sweethearts. After college, you've been dating that long, there are only a couple of choices. You break up or you get married. And the way I got engaged was she goes, "Look, we're too old to keep dating." I think we were all of 22. Yeah. I'm not going to live with you, which would have been my choice, lease with an option to buy.
Yeah.
And so marry me or I'm going to move on. And that's how I got engaged. So I say to the audience, anybody else besides me ever get engaged by ultimatum? Um, And then I knew going down the aisle, and when the preacher said, "Do you take this woman?" My mouth said, "I do." My brain said, "I'll try." And I tell
Oh,
it, you don't try marriage, you try grape nuts for a couple of weeks. Uh, you know,
yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
yeah. But I just didn't have the testicular fortitude to back out.
Me either. I've come to learn that we all, as souls, choose the lives and experiences to further our souls thrive on and want to excel, move on, and learn.
Sherry, I have often said that as bad as the marriage was, and it was, we just did not belong together. It wasn't violent or, wasn't emotionally
Yeah.
charged. Just had no business being together. However, after we got separated and then ultimately divorced, I met my second wife. The benefit of having a first spouse, I think, one of the benefits, yeah, a starter spouse, is you have a really solid list of things you do not want
Yeah.
partner. So my next thought was, well, I need to make a list of things I do want. So I made a
Yeah.
list. And within 48 hours, I bumped into my second wife now of 37 years. And 10 seconds either way, I would not have bumped into her. So if I had to go through the first marriage again to get to the second one, I would happily go through the first one again just to get
Yep.
back to that time and place, that exact moment when we met.
Where and when you met.
So here's the deal. I am at the grocery store on my way to a double date with a friend of mine, the guy that I was living with, a friend of mine in North Carolina. I moved in with him, slept on his couch after I got separated. I go into the store and there's a beautiful woman in the checkout lane. Just exactly what I was looking for. Tall, blonde, musty.
Yeah.
It was my list.
Yeah.
So I had some comedy business cards printed and I just picked them up that day. The ink was practically still wet. I decided I would rush through with my purchases, go through the express lane, hope to catch her, on the way out or right after she got out of the store. Come out of the store with my purchases, and there she is sitting on the bench out in front. She's packing her bike bags. San Diego, so people bike all the time. She's
Yes.
packing her bike bags. So I walked over, I coughed so she would look up. I handed her my business card and I said, if you ever need a laugh, give me a call. And I walked away. That's all I said. She thought it was a joke line. She called it was my answering machine back in the day, old-fashioned answering machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
She left her work number wisely. And so I called her and we set a date for the following Tuesday. Now, here's the thing. The place I was, the neighborhood we were in is in San Diego. It's called Hillcrest. It is the largest
Yes.
concentration of gay folks outside of the Bay Area in California. And there were a lot of female impersonator bars in the neighborhood.
What year?
1984.
Okay.
And so she was tall, very muscular, wearing a lot of makeup, false eyelashes. And so, given the neighborhood, I began to worry after we decided to go out that she might have outdoor, not indoor plumbing. So I told my roommate, look, here's her address. If I don't call you by midnight, send the cops to this address because I'm playing the crying game and losing. At 11:45 that night, I said to her, can I borrow your phone? She goes, sure. So right in front of her, I called my roommate and said simply, it's a girl. That's how we met.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Any final comments, thoughts, or anything you want people who will listen to this to know?
Yes, that I helped you get booked for something called a speak event. It's the number one TEDx competitor. It's a 6 to 10 minute storytelling format. And you worked very hard with the gentleman who run the joint. And you did 6 to 10 minutes, I assume, on stage for them. And I guess blew them away. They were, you have difficulty speaking. It's not a secret. But you worked really hard. They worked hard with you. And I'm told because several of my other clients were there when you spoke and that you did a spectacular job. So that's what I would like the audience to know.
Thank you. Anything not about me that you want people to know about suicide, mental illness?
Yes. 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to an attempt, which means you can make a difference. You can save a life. You don't have to be a mental health professional. You can make a difference. You can save a life. And you can do it by doing something as simple as you and I are doing right here, and that is starting a conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transcending Trauma, the Spiritual Odyssey. If you're working to overcome trauma and would like to work with me or be a guest on my show, contact me through my website at shariroberts.org. Please hit the follow button to make sure you don't miss any episodes. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn at Shari Roberts. You can find all the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Shari Roberts, your host, reminding you that you're never alone. Until next time, sending you love and light.